Wonderful. Well, good morning to everyone. We are so excited to welcome you to our May meeting for the Triad chapter of the National African American Gun Association. We're really excited this morning. We have Kendrick Scott, who is the president of our local chapter here, and we have two very important guests, Philip Smith and Douglas Jefferson, that will be introduced momentarily. I am Joy Allen. Myself, along with Delon Fletcher, are going to help filter your questions this morning and help administratively. But I'm going to get out of the way and allow Kendrick to take over and get us started with our meeting. So Kendrick, thank you so much. And whenever you're ready,
thank you so much, Joy. First, I want to thank everyone out there at Facebook Live for tuning in today. Joy's given us a kind of a quick introduction, but I did want to briefly mention all of our chapter leadership members that have helped pull this thing together. Again, my name is Kendrick Scott. I'm the president of the chapter. We have also serving with me is Joy Allen, who's helping facilitate today. Delon Fletcher, Al DeOrleans, who I think is traveling right now. Kevin Bond and Reginald Roundtree are our leadership team here in the Triangle area. I'd also like to give a shout out to our home range at Eagle One. They have been supporting this chapter from its inception, whether it's financially, they give us places to meet. They've raffled off some memberships for us. They give us a great place to shoot. So I just want to make sure I give a shout out to our home range and make sure that everyone that's watching here knows that they're located in Raleigh, and you should make them your one-stop shop for all of your firearm needs. Great place to shoot. Tell them the chapter sent you if you go out there. So just a couple chapter announcements I want to make real quick before we get started. Our next chapter engagement will be on May 16th. It's the third Saturday of the month, which is our normal meeting time. We hope that you'll tune in then. We have another great speaker that's going to come in for that session. When this craziness of the virus has subsided, we will obviously be back to meeting at Eagle One on every third Saturday at 10:30 in the morning. So all of you that have not been to a chapter meeting yet, please come on out and engage with us. Lastly, we ask that you consider joining NAAGA. It's a great organization. It's why we are all here. We want to get those members to actually join the group and join the organization. Memberships start at just $29 for an annual membership. So we encourage you to please do that. If you have any questions at all, please see one of the chapter leadership folks. I thought it was last, but the one more thing I wanted to bring up was we are looking for volunteers for the chapter. So if you're one of those people that have been out there on the sidelines looking for a way to get engaged with us, or your heart desires you to do more than just attend a meeting, again, hit one of those chapter leadership folks up. We'd love to have you come out and help participate in any of our chapter events. So with that, let's jump into why we're actually here. Today we have with us the founder and CEO of the National African American Gun Association, Philip Smith, and Vice President of Chapters, and that is Douglas Jefferson joining us today. So guys, welcome, and I'm going to dive right into it and just ask a couple questions. Philip, again, we really appreciate you being here, but we want to ask just a couple of questions. So first, for both of you, how are your families doing in this craziness that's going on? We know you're down in Atlanta, where apparently you all are leading the nation and opening up a society again. So how are you guys doing just with the virus in general?
Go ahead, Doug. In general, everybody's healthy, which is the most important part. All my family is good. My wife and I, we work. She works in the medical field. I work in emergency management. So we've obviously not been able to stay home and work from home, but we're taking all proper precautions to keep ourselves safe. So far so good, but we'll be really glad when things kind of get back to normal.
Awesome. So Phil, if you don't mind, can you give us just tell us a little bit of background of the organization, some of the origins of how NAAGA became, and like who the first chapter and how it started to grow when you first launched this?
Sure. And thank you for having us here, for having myself and Douglas here. Back in 2015, after going to arrange with a couple of buddies that I work with, I saw a need, or a possible need, for us to have an opportunity to start a Black organization for firearm enthusiasts. And it was just by going to the range and looking at those folks that are there that I kind of said, you know what, if I'm having fun doing this for 2 weeks in a row, I think folks in our community could definitely have fun and learn about firearms at the same time, where they can go over safety and, you know, for the bigger picture, just have a good understanding of the firearms for their safety of their families and themselves. So that was the initial catalyst. And from that point, I went back home, did some research on what organizations were out there for African Americans, which were none. They had little small firearm, what I call clubs, but there was really not a national voice for African Americans. And at that time, I sat down and put together what I thought would be a good template for success for the National African American Gun Association. So that was the initial catalyst after going to the range and seeing folks that didn't necessarily look like me, but from that I said, you know what, if they could have fun, we can have fun and learn something at the same time.
Yeah, absolutely. And being an enthusiast myself, I can totally relate to when I used to go to the range back in the early and late 90s, there was definitely no one that looked like me going there. And that's why when I came across what you've created, I was so excited, like, oh, wow, finally something for us. Well, yeah. Can you give us just a few milestones of the organization, things that, so for, in case there's someone that's watching that hasn't really, didn't know a whole lot about NAAGA or what it stands for, kind of give us an overview of, goals, missions, and some milestones of where we are now.
I think the biggest milestone and probably the big elephant in the room was the start of the organization in 2015. It was started on February 28th in honor of Black History Month. And the reason why that's so important for us, when I say us, Black folks, is that it was a connection to Black History Month, because as you and I know, and everyone online now understand, we have a direct connection to our ancestors. And we have to recognize that you and I just didn't get here by chance. There was a process. People died for us to have the opportunities that we have, to have the jobs that we have. So I wanted to make sure that there was a connection, not only in our start, but as we continue to go down the line, we constantly look back and appreciate and respect those that have came before us.
Awesome. So as you travel around the country and engage with mainstream media, how's the organization been received? I mean, is it a positive thing, or people like, oh my God, what are they creating here?
Yeah. I think back in 2015 and 2016, it was an initial kind of, standoffish kind of feeling, kind of a weird view. What are you guys doing? Black folks with guns, typically those two words don't go well together. And after sitting down with, myself and other members that are trying to promote the organization, they understood very, very quickly what we're about. We're about excellence. We're about safety. We're about education. We're about promoting the African American community in a positive way. And there's nothing wrong with that. We're unapologetic. When I say we, the organization is unapologetic about our stance in terms of we love ourselves so much as a community and as a people. We are also going to protect ourselves and our families and our kids and our loved ones. And there's nothing wrong with that. That's our right here as an American in the country, and it's part of the Second Amendment. So we should never take a back step or step back and feel like we're doing something that is quote unquote, wrong, because it's part of our right.
Excellent. I agree wholeheartedly. So one of the things I get a lot of times when I'm out promoting the organization is, people are like, hey, are you all the Black NRA? So just speak to how we can, how that concept really applies to us.
I get that question a lot, and I'm sure Doug gets it as well. I think the greatest difference in NAAGA and any other organization is that we are a community-based organization from the bottom up, not the top down. In other words, our chapters, our members on the ground are the heart and soul, the beat of the organization. Without that, we are nothing. So we try to have conversations with our members in terms of how you really are as a person, how you're wanting to join the organization. Do you want to get involved with shotguns? Do you want to shoot, trap? Do you want to work on self-defense or tactical stuff? Or do you just want to learn the basics of firearms and go home and be happy and put it in your nightstand? All of those are good, but we try to make sure that we are growing as an organization the right way, focusing on those that information for our folks. So I think we're going in the right direction.
I want to piggyback off with something that Phil just said real quickly. As far as what we try to get across to our membership and what we want to promote as an organization, we really stress the fact that as Black gun owners, we're not just Black gun owners. We are productive and upstanding members of our community, and we contribute to our community in a variety of positive ways. We urge all of our members and our chapters to be involved in their community. So not just bringing good factual information about Second Amendment rights and how important they are to our community, but also just being engaged in community service in general. Because there's a lot of work that can be done in our community. And as we know, there is a certain stigma that comes with being a Black gun owner, whether it's folks outside of our community looking at us, but even within our community. Our own community members can look at guns and not have a positive outlook on gun ownership. And so it's our job as Black gun owners to make sure that we represent a very good, a very professional, and a very positive image in our community. So they see us as just, we're just not, Black person that they know that owns a gun, but we're a Black person that is actively engaged with the community, doing community projects, engaged with the youth, engaged with the elders, engaged with anything that is positive that's going on in that community. And so seeing us as full people, as full individuals, and not just being pigeonholed as like, oh, well, just, they're Black gun owners. Like, no, we're no different than anyone else. We just happen to take our self-defense very personally and take it into our own hands to make sure that we can protect ourselves, and then by extension be able to protect those that we love within our community as well.
Excellent. So going along those same lines, though, as the name implies, we are the National African American Gun Association, but could one of you all talk a little bit about the inclusiveness that's also woven into the fabric of the organization?
Sure. I'll say a few words on Doug. You can pop in also. The fact that I'm very, very proud of this one issue that we are able to do at a high level, we attract universally folks from outside of our community, white, Black, Asian, Latino, gay, straight, Republican, Democrat. When people from outside of your circle are attracted to your theme, your ethos, that says something at a very large, high level. And that means that we appreciate what you're doing. We like the way you are moving your information and your process to your community, and we want to be a part of that. And when that happens, and it is continually happening, we're getting members from all types of areas within our community that are joining, that want to participate with NAAGA on many, many different levels. And to me, that speaks volumes that we must be doing something right in terms of our messaging, the imagery, the branding of the organization. Because make no mistake about it, there's some folks out there that don't want us to succeed, So we have to be very, very careful, very, very diligent on how we present that information continually to our folks and to our larger community.
One thing I really appreciate about what Phil's done with this organization and his vision and his leadership is that, one, he's very open to surrounding himself with people that are experts, people that are professionals, people that really know their particular areas of expertise. And he's not shy about doing that. I mean, he brings so much to the organization just by having that. I mean, your best leaders have to know how to identify and surround themselves with those type of people. And I found working with Phil, even on, whether it be other members on the executive team or other chapter presidents, everybody is just highly motivated and wants to do right by our community, and is very open and honest about the fact that, hey, this organization is for us, by us, right? It is a Black organization for Black people, led by Black people. And that's not to say that we're not open to other communities, as Phil has already laid out. But if there are other members that see what we're doing, other people outside of our community that see what we're doing and see it as a positive and want to be a part of it, and are okay with us leading our own community, then wanting to help and participate in that mission, then we welcome them with open arms.
Right.
And Doug hit some great points. I just want to add this just very quickly. The hardest thing you can do as an organization, if you're supposedly a big tent organization, in other words, everyone is welcome, is to sit down with someone in your own organization that has joined NAAGA, that has a definitely different view of firearms, and engage with him or her and say, okay, I know you believe this, but I believe this. And how did you get to that particular point with your mindset? And still embrace that person as your brother or your sister. That's a very difficult process. It takes a person with some big pants to do that. And I think we are very, very good at that particular point that Doug just pointed out. Regardless of where you come from, you're welcome. But knowing that we incorporate a lot of different types of folks, you're going to run across people that are Black Democrats, Black Republicans, gay, straight, rich, poor, some grumpy, believe it or not, whatever the case may be, but you still have to respect that person's journey. And one of the first things that I do, as I've done with everyone that I've met at NAAGA, how did you come to this point in your life to either like or dislike guns? And most folks that I interact like guns. So what was it in your journey? And I just sit back and I do the greatest thing in the world. I listen. Okay, you went through this. Okay, great. Okay, this is my view. And sometimes the discussions can get heated, for lack of a better word, but there's always respectful. And that's the best thing that people know. When you join our organization, you'll be embraced as my brother or my sister, truly, and you will be respected. And you don't get that type of ethos from a lot of other organizations out there.
Yeah, I would just let you two know that, you know, our chapter is very diverse, and we love the inclusivity that we have in our group. But I want to switch gears a little bit real quick and talk about the convention, or the lack of the convention for right now. There are some folks that are probably on here that didn't know about the convention. So if you could just kind of give us maybe two pieces, an overall of what the convention was to be, and maybe even before that, kind of let those that are current members, let them know where we stand. We've made the announcement on our page,
Yeah.
but we'd like to know kind of what happened, what went into that decision making, where we are, and just give us an overview of what the convention status is right now.
Sure, I'll give you my comments, and Doug, definitely chime in. It was a celebration. That was the projection. It was going to be a great celebration for the first time in the United States. An African-American gun organization was to have an inaugural convention, and that was going to be huge, the first time ever. And it was planned to have guest speakers, exhibitors, great partners, sponsorships from all over the US. So it was going to be a really, really positive thing. Unfortunately, as everyone knows, the coronavirus has thrown a monkey wrench in this for everyone. You just can't have a convention with real folks, and I'm not talking virtually, a convention, and have people close to one another at this stage in the US because of the social distancing, the threat of the virus not being controlled and really managed at this point. A year from now, I think it will be in August of 2021, but right now we just could not have the convention and feel safe for our members coming in, even with a high level of precautions. And I'm talking masks, I'm talking masks, gloves, all those things in place. It still was going to be a monumental effort for folks to feel comfortable. And I just didn't think, and Doug can definitely give his perspective, I didn't think it was prudent to move ahead with all those issues coming out. And one thing that the virus has done, folks have lost their jobs. A lot of folks that are NAAGA members. So the economic consequences of the virus has been very, very dramatic for a lot of our members. So they're trying to get their sea legs again, trying to get going. So we have to kind of say, okay, let's take a step back, give everybody a year or so to get themselves together, and then let's have the convention. So that was the mindset of the leadership, and my mindset as well. So, Doug.
Yeah, so pretty much right in line with Phil's feelings on this. We just looked at, as badly as we want to have a convention, first and foremost, the safety and the health of our membership has to come first. And that health and safety, not just of their physical bodies, obviously, with the threats of the coronavirus, but their economic health and safety. Because with the shelter-in-place orders, a number of them which are expiring now, but were in place for anywhere from 3 to 6 weeks in some places. You had massive job losses. Record number of Americans have filed for unemployment. And unfortunately, as we know, when it comes to any type of negative outcomes in this country, unfortunately, African Americans, we suffer disproportionately compared to other groups of people in this country. So as we've seen just in the sicknesses and the deaths of people have been disproportionately African American, we can have that same expectation as far as economically those that are going to be losing jobs and in the most dire economic straits. So we didn't feel that this would be the time to go forth with the convention, because the convention is for the members. It's not for the leadership team. It's something that we want to bring to the membership because it's something that has been asked for quite some time. And we were finally in a position where we could pull it off and be successful and really put on like a really, really great event. But, you know, forces outside of our control sort of stepped in, and we had to really take you know, an honest look at it and ask ourselves if this is going to, you know, continuing forward would be in the best service of membership, which ultimately decided it wasn't. So we did delay to next year in 2021 to ensure that we give people time to recover, both health-wise, both financially, but also spiritually and mentally, because there are people in our community that are losing and have lost loved ones, and we want to make sure that they have the time necessary to get the closure that they need to move forward with their lives and recover economically and health-wise. So it's unfortunate that we had to delay, but I think ultimately it's in the best service of the membership that we made that decision.
Yeah, and I would definitely share with both of you that the minute that we received word of the postponement, and I think it's important that people hear that it's postponement, not canceling. It's a postponement of this event. Instantly, our chapter leadership team was lockstep that it was the right decision, and very supportive of the decision you all made. So with that, knowing that it's a postponement and not a cancellation, looking forward, that brings me to the next thing I wanted to ask you about. So now that the organization is 5 years old, and we've got, you know, a core base of chapters, where's the organization going now? What is the next, what do you all see in the near future? What do you see 5 years from now, 10 years from now for the organization? And just give us a sense of where we're going.
Sure. I think it's easy to say that we're very good at doing the things that we're doing right now. We can build out chapters, and we can attract members that want to participate as an African American or in an African American organization. But beyond that, looking really kind of in a visionary type of perspective, where are we going? Do we just want to have chapters and every once a month or twice a month we all get together and just say, you know, that's great to do, but what's another thing that we can accomplish in this process? And to me, it's a lot of different little things that add up to a big thing, but I think we should try to have a membership in the next 5 years over 100,000. I think we can make that relatively easy because we have not marketed the company, the organization at all. It's literally word of mouth. We are now starting this year to market the organization on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, word of mouth, and it is having an effect in terms of our growth. We are starting to see ourselves grow. I think, and Doug can give his perspective, I think we have an obligation to our community to have a PAC, and that's a political action committee. I know some folks don't agree with that. I understand it. They want us to stay in our lane, which is just make chapters, have African Americans learn how to shoot, get really good at that, go home and be able to protect their families and their loved ones. That's great. But I think we've been given a blessing. We have done incredible things with very, very little fanfare in terms of advertising dollars to get to 30,000 folks. I think it's an obligation. We have an organization that addresses the legal challenges some of our people in our community have nationally. Some Black gentlemen are not able to get licenses to carry a gun in some states. We should be able to assist them. Some of our folks are being arrested for carrying a gun when they have the right to carry the gun. We need to assist them. You can't sit back, to me, and get all the accolades and not want to get down on the street or get dirty, as some of the young folks say, and not help your fellow man. To me, that is nothing short of being just selfish and very single-minded. We're a big organization, have a lot of different folks with a lot of different ideas. And I think we should start moving in that direction. Now, I'm not going to sit there and act like my word is the gospel, because it's not, because I have to talk to Doug. I've got to talk to our executive team. And we come out with some type of, okay, this is the strategy that we're going to do or not do. But I think we have an obligation to look further as an organization to build upon what we've had in terms of success. And that part of that success is being a source of a source that can be a resource for others that don't have. Legally, in terms of advice, in some cases, helping them with a particular situation that they need help on. But we can't sit back, to me, and just say, hey, we're the National African American Gun Association, look at us and shine our shield and say, look at us, we're doing great. We have an obligation to help those that need our help. So I'm just big on community. And when I say community, I mean really loving your brother or your sister in every sense of that word when they need help. Because a lot of us need help out there. And I think we should do so or make those steps to do that.
So I'm absolutely in agreement with Phil in that we have to, as an organization, moving forward, we have to be involved in the political sphere in some form or fashion. I think a lot of people have a bad taste for politics, particularly in our community, because if we look at the history of politics and even present day, a lot of them are, policies and laws and stances that people take and aren't really supportive of our community. And we've seen a history of bad policy, particularly in our communities, where we can look around and see, schools that are underfunded. People don't have the children don't have the books and the supplies they need. People in our communities aren't able to get access to non-predatory capital to own homes and start businesses and send children to school. Often a number of communities exist where there are police departments that aren't accountable to those communities. And all of that is dictated by politics, by law, regulation, and policy. And so if we want to be the most impactful positively for our community, we have to be involved in that on some level of advocacy and of making our wants and our needs known to politicians, and make sure that they know that we are a constituency that should be respected and should have all the rights and privileges of any other American citizens in this country. And so I absolutely agree. We have to be involved. We have to go into it from a place of supporting policy and not supporting politicians, right? Because the policy can go from politician to politician, but the politician doesn't necessarily have to stay true to that policy. We have to, be involved with advocacy, making our wants and needs known, because we can vote all we want, but voting, we have to remember that voting is only part of the game, right? That's the end game. We have to make sure that we dictate what's going to be on the ballot, right? So make sure there are choices there on the ballot that we want, that are going to be beneficial for us, and approach voting from a standpoint that voting is, voting is an exchange. It's not a gift, right? We don't take part in political charity. We just give our vote to someone just because they're with this group or that group. We make that person in that group earn our vote, right? We make sure that they are presenting policy and that they are being supportive of our community. And part of doing that can be forming a PAC. Part of doing that can be creating a structure in which people can, members across the country can bring problems to us and we can help solve them. Like in the case of Philip spoke of, where we have members that can't get licensed because they live in may issue states, where the government official can decide, on their own whether or not you get a license or not, regardless of whether you are, legally able to carry, as in being, having no felonies and having no misdemeanor charges of domestic violence. We can address the draconian laws that make a number of our members of our community second class or really third class citizens by, because once if they end up being incarcerated, coming out having that felony, now they lose all sorts of rights, losing the right to vote, losing the right to access public funds, particularly to start businesses, to get job training, to have housing, losing the right to own and firearms to protect themselves, obviously, right? And it can be, non-violent felonies, like, many of our community are convicted of for, just simple possession of certain drug substances. So those affect the ability of our community to succeed, and they affect the ability of our community to protect themselves. So we have to make sure that if we really, really, truly care about protecting our community, we have to get involved in this game.
Excellent.
Can I
Excellent.
say one more thing?
Oh, sure.
If years from now, if Doug came to me and said, "Hey, Phil, I'm the retired president. I'm gone. I'm out, soaking the sun up." And I say, "How's NAAGA doing?" And he said to me, "Well, we're about 250,000 members now. We're doing great." And then I asked him, "Hey, Doug, do we have anything else going on?" And he said, "No, I would be personally disappointed, because that means all we're doing is developing chapters and having nice meetings, but we're not doing anything else." So just to kind of put a big 10,000-foot view on everything, we have to, and I want to say this, I'll slam my little desk here, we have to help our folks in many different ways, as Doug has eloquently outlined. It's part of our mandate, or it should be part of our mandate. So I just want to add that.
Okay, great. So again, shifting just a few gears, so I'm being mindful of our time. Phil, recently you spoke with our leadership team and kind of explained some partnerships and some things, some training programs and other things that are out there. Can you maybe just kind of give our membership base and those that are contemplating on joining NAAGA kind of, hey, these are some things that we're doing as an organization as it relates to specifically firearms?
Sure. The biggest thing we are working on, and I announced this earlier this week, I think, is the partnership with USCCA. They are a nationally recognized and highly respected firearms training organization, and that's what they do. They don't get into the politics, they don't get into anything else. They just really have a solid training program from A to Z, covering training, education, safety, tactical, all that good stuff. So I thought it was a natural fit for their organization with our national membership based on the chapters that we have and the members where we have them. They are supportive of our organization. They're supportive of our mandate in terms of training African Americans, and they understand the long-term goal that we're trying to reach. So that was the biggest announcement. We are going to have, as I told USCCA, my goal is to have an army of African American instructors that go out and train other African Americans to know how to shoot a gun, how to handle a gun, all that good stuff. That's our goal, and by partnering with them, I think we can get to that goal. I think our folks, we are very intuitive. We like to see someone that looks like us when we are training, preferably. Doesn't mean we're prejudiced or anything like that, but it's a breath of fresh air when you walk in the room, because typically it's not that way. And we see someone that looks like us that's leading the training. And I think it is very, very a big plus when we can have, as I said before, a large number of African American trained instructors nationwide that are doing that chapter to chapter. So I thought it was a win-win-win by partnering with USCCA. Now we're also trying to work with some other large firearms manufacturers. We have not finalized any type of agreements, but we are working diligently on a daily basis with reaching out to those folks and letting them know that we even exist. Because most folks don't even know that we exist right now, and that's a plus. We're at 30,000 folks, and we're really not known. Just think when we really start pushing the pedal to get out there. So the USCCA partnership is definitely, I think, a good step in the right direction for us.
So can you talk a little bit about the NEST program that we saw coming out as well?
Yeah, the NEST program came out of executive leadership and myself looking at the state of our folks nationwide. We've got all these chapters, 85 chapters right now, but on the books, but we have probably another 10 or 15 that are already set up and ready to roll out. So that's going to make our pushes over 100. And in all those chapters, and even so with the members at large that really don't have a chapter close to them, there's a lot of apprehension. People are looking at the coronavirus. They're looking at, potentially some breakdowns in society as in terms of having access to resources. So we just said to ourselves, let's develop what we call the NAAGA Emergency Support Team. And the NEST can be anything that you make it. I'll give you an example. For my NEST, it's a total of 7 people in my neighborhood that look out for one another. One person has access to medical supplies, another person has access to land, another person has expertise with getting products, toilet paper, another person's a nurse. So we put together what I call my NEST. So just in case something happens, you have instant access to those folks. We communicate bi-weekly, and we have a monthly virtual meeting now. And just in case something really happens, we have access to at least a group of people that you trust to a certain level. It doesn't guarantee anything, but at least you have a foundation of folks that can help you. In my mindset, and it's my hope anyway, that this process can be duplicated over and over, chapter to chapter, member to member in their various neighborhoods and communities, because it's these are very uneasy times, let's face it. I'm not trying to be an alarmist, but there are some things that are happening out there that are kind of, we're not used to going through as Americans, regardless of your color. So I think the nest was just a step in the right direction, just to give you a little more reliability and stability and confidence that everything's going to be okay. And if something does happen, just for a brief period of time, you have some folks that are close by that can assist you. It just might be a phone call. Hey, everything's going to be okay. Or how can I help you? Or you having a tough time today? And this could be anything that you wanted, because it represents a support for you during a time of uncertainty.
Great. So can you also speak to, I think Douglas hit on this a little bit, but I want to really dive deeper into what are some of the unique challenges that NAAGA is trying to address as it relates to African-American gun ownership. I know when we have some of our chapter meetings, we've had some folks float in, especially in the times that we're in now. There's a lot of fear and apprehension out there, but there seems to be almost more fear and apprehension of just being an African-American person and owning a firearm or going out and feeling like you can actually own an AR-15 and have that in your possession. And speak a little bit to how can NAAGA help those folks overcome those fears and anxieties that we have in our community? The
most consistent question I have gotten over the last 5 years, without question, and these are from doctors, engineers, federal workers, state workers, even some even from some law enforcement officials, do I really need to have a firearm for the community? Does the community need a firearm? And it's been like drilled in our social DNA from 1800s when we first arrived here, that you do not value your life enough to want to protect it. And that is our biggest battle day in and day out, because it's always in the background. I've got a gun, I've got multiple guns, but for some folks, they look at like, well, am I doing something kinda on the edge? No, our ancestors died for us to be here today with the rights to purchase a gun under the Second Amendment. And we should never take a back step on that issue to anyone. I don't care if it's a Black politician, Democrat, Republican, friend or foe, that's your right. My ancestors, your ancestors, all of our ancestors died for us, and we have that right. So the biggest battle we have, and Doug and I have had multiple theoretical conversations with ourselves going back and forth about how we get over this hump, but it's really been drilled down into our community, even till today. So much to the fact that when you go buy a gun, and let's be honest here, let's just keep it 100, we're family. When you buy a gun and you tell your friends or your partners, hey, I got a gun, they kind of look at you, oh, you bought a gun? That's the initial conversation or the initial reaction for a lot of our folks. It's starting to get to be, oh, you bought a gun, that's a good thing. And that's the goal. Change the mindset, change the DNA that's been drilled in your head that you don't have a gun. And there's no silver bullet. There's no instant answer. It's going to take multiple conversations continually for years, like we're doing today, which is a great thing. It's a healthy discussion that we're having. And I applaud you and your executive team at the North Carolina chapter for having this, because I think we need it as a people. But we have to have ongoing conversations like this that are going to be beneficial to our community, because a lot of us need a lot of work in terms of you're not a second class or a sub-citizen, as I tell all of my folks I'm interacting with. We have ancestors that died for you to get here. So you have every right to purchase a gun and to assemble in a group and lawfully practice shooting a gun. There's nothing illegal about that.
I think one of the reasons we have such challenges as a community with viewing gun ownership as a net positive is something and as a right that we should embrace and be engaged with, is that a lot of us just aren't aware of the history of gun ownership within our community, and that moral, that ethical history amongst men and women, African-American men and women in our community, to ensure that we have the rights that we have today and have the ability to continue to fight for the respect, those rights to be respected today and into the future. There's a very long and proud Black tradition of arms that just many people just don't know about. And I found often people that ask me, African-American people that ask me, you know, hey, why are you a gun owner? Or why should African-American people own firearms? You know, what about black on black crime? What about, you know, all those questions come up. And I challenge them with the history of that gun ownership in our community and how it has been integral to us protecting and ensuring the rights of ourselves as citizens in these United States. The right to bear arms is integrally connected to the protection and the gaining of the right to vote. And most people are not aware of that. But going into that history and telling people about it, once they learn it, they have a very different perspective on firearms. And I can't say that that converts every single person into a firearm owner, but pretty much everyone at that point understands that, okay, I see why and understand why an African-American person will want to own a firearm and practice their Second Amendment right. Because the Second Amendment, as it's written and as it's applied in this country, it's supposed to fill that gap where the government, no matter how benevolent, can't be there to protect you. You know, because it's simple time and physics, right? You know, not too many of us, at least that I know, have, you know, armed bodyguards that just kind of follow them around and for the bad guy to jump out the bushes to, you know, spring into action, right? We have to be responsible for that protection ourselves. What the Second Amendment has meant to the African-American community in particular, because of our history, is that it has filled that gap where the government wouldn't be there to protect us because of incompetence, because of moral cowardice, or because of outright malice towards African-American people and the African-American community. So that's the history of the Second Amendment in this country for the African-American people, is using that to shore up that gap in government protection and protect us until we could demand through organized political action and protests and advocacy that the government protect us and respect our rights in the same way that it does anyone else's.
Excellent. Well, being mindful of time, I wanted to give one final question to you guys, just on a personal note. So could you tell our folks real quick, first firearm you purchased and maybe favorite handgun and rifle?
That's an easy one for me. I like the Daniel Defense rifles. All their rifles are like Mercedes-Benz of the gun world. They're nice. They're consistent. They function very well. My first gun, our pistol that I purchased was a Glock 19, and I still have it today.
So my first rifle that I purchased was an AR-15. Actually, that was the first firearm period that I purchased. And the first handgun that I purchased, it was a Glock 19 as well. I still have that Glock. The Glock 19 to me for handguns, it's like the Goldilocks gun, not too big, not too small, just right. You know, it fits so many different situations as far as concealed carrying personal protection. For AR-15s, gosh, I like Daniel Defense. I like Bravo Company. I've got a couple of Palmetto State Armory, you know, kind of beater rifles hanging around the house. You know, looking to get some more in the future. Looking at some Sons of Liberty, Gunworks firearms. You know, handguns. Also have a Beretta M9 that you know, because I just like this got classic lines. You know, if you ever seen any of the not Lethal Weapon, but yeah, the Lethal Weapon movies, you know, Murtaugh and Riggs, yeah. So yeah, that's my guns in a nutshell.
Yeah, I was thinking you guys you all jumped into some really nice stuff to begin with. I was waiting to hear a High Point was your first firearm. I also, yeah, I've been probably shooting since I was 23 years old. And my first firearm, I'll never forget, was a Taurus PT92 stainless steel that I think was the greatest thing ever. And it's interesting because my second gun was a Glock 19, and I still have that Gen 2 1996 purchase
I just want to say thank you to you guys and in North Carolina for having this format. It's needed, as I said before, and hopefully you guys have a lot more coming down the pipeline. Discussion and conversation is something that our community needs to have. It's a healthy way we can kind of rehash and view things on a big scale and small scale. So thank you for the time, and I really appreciate it.
All right, Philip, thank you so much again. And I really look forward to the things we have on the horizon, and definitely anything that the Triangle chapter up here in North Carolina can do to help you guys down there, please don't hesitate to let us know. So for the rest of you folks, we're going to give you, our time limit is coming upon us, but we wanted to bring you just a nugget, just a preview of a larger presentation that we're going to do that Douglas Jefferson has put together, and he is kind of the guru on historical figures in the African-American community as it relates to the Second Amendment. So Douglas, I'm going to turn it over to you, and have at it, sir.
All right. Let me set up right quick.
Douglas, let me know if you have any difficulty sharing your screen.
All right, will do. So it looks like it's getting set up now. Can everybody see my screen here?
It looks like it's coming through.
Let's go.
And we have success. We can see your working PowerPoint, and now we can see your presentation view. So you are all set.
Awesome, awesome. All right, so I've written down what I'm going to say so that I can stay on time, because there is a lot to cover. So I'm very passionate about history, particularly Black history, and particularly in this organization that I'm a part of, African American history in relation to the Black tradition of arms. So what is the Black tradition of arms? That is the history of African Americans and their involvement with the Second Amendment in this country, from 1619, when our first enslaved ancestors were brought over to this country, all the way up to the modern day. On the screen right here, you can see these are 3 of the texts that will pretty much take you through, give you a pretty good foundation of that Black tradition of arms. I like to bring attention to the book that's in the middle, Negroes and the Gun, The Black Tradition of Arms by Nicholas Johnson. If I were to teach a university level class about the Black tradition of arms, that book, Negroes and the Gun, would be the text for that class, because it basically takes you from A to Z, beginning up to present day, broad overview of that Black tradition of arms in this country. With the other 2 books, This Nonviolent Stuff Will Get You Killed, How Guns Made the Civil Rights Movement Possible, and We Will Shoot Back, Armed Resistance in the Mississippi Freedom Movement. Also 2 great texts that give additional background information and exploring particular segments of that Black tradition of arms. So we've got our first person up here, which is historical figure Ida B. Wells. She says the lesson this teaches, and which every African-American should ponder well, is that the Winchester rifle should have a place of honor in every Black home. So she made this statement in response to incidents of Black armed self-defense against lynch mobs in the 1890s, particularly in Florida and Kentucky. She was a staunch anti-lynching activist and a proponent of armed self-defense. She was adept at using her First Amendment right as a journalist, and she wrote for numerous publications, including the Memphis Free Speech and New York Age, to cover incidents where African Americans defended themselves with firearms against racist white terrorism. Additionally, she wrote many persuasive arguments calling on African Americans to use Second Amendment rights to defend themselves. She was very specific in calling upon African Americans to obtain the Winchester repeating rifles to defend themselves, as Winchester was the most advanced rifle of its day and similar in use to the modern day AR-15. Right, so when people say, you know, why do you need an AR-15? I mean, think of, you know, sort of the history and things that, incidents that African Americans have experienced. And really, it's not really a need conversation, it's a matter of right. So W.E.B. Du Bois, so most people didn't know that he had any kind of stance on the Second Amendment, but specifically he said, I bought a Winchester double-barrel shotgun and 2 dozen rounds of shells filled with buckshot. If a white mob had stepped on the campus where I lived, I would without hesitation have sprayed their guts over the grass. So pretty fiery language from Mr. Du Bois, considering who we know him to be as a person. So this statement was made by Du Bois in response to the Atlanta anti-Black riots of September 1906. At the time, he was an economics and history professor at the Atlanta University. Du Bois is arguably the preeminent African-American intellectual on race of his time and a staunch proponent of Black armed self-defense. Additionally, he was the co-founder of the NAACP and editor of its flagship magazine, The Crisis, where he wrote extensively on the necessity of African-Americans to use arms to defend themselves against racist white terrorism, as well as valorizing instances where African-Americans did just that. In his seminal work, The Souls of Black Folks, he made a distinction between political violence, which he saw as folly, and individual self-defense, which he saw as a practical necessity of ordinary African-Americans should embrace. And also we have to point out, he was also a member of the Alpha Phi Alpha chapter, the Alpha Phi Alpha fraternity, I should say, which is the fraternity of our President Philip Smith. So I'd be remiss if I didn't mention that. All right, Fannie Lou Hamer. So Miss Fannie Lou Hamer said, I'll tell you why. I keep a shotgun in every corner of my bedroom, and the first cracker, even to look like he wants to throw some dynamite on my porch, won't write his mama again. So once again, fire language was not exclusive to our men folk. Our women folk had it just as well. So Mrs. Hamer, she made this statement in response to the question of how she survived threats of violence against her for civil rights activism. Born into a Mississippi sharecropping family in 1917, Mrs. Hamer spent much of her early life in the cotton fields. She became involved with the Student Nonviolent Coordinating Committee, or SNCC, in 1962, through which she led voting drives and relief efforts. Although an active participant in nonviolent protests against government oppression of African American people, she was a staunch believer in armed self-defense as both a practical and moral response to the very real violence she herself and African Americans in general were routinely confronted with in Jim Crow, Mississippi. In 1964, she co-founded and ran for Congress as a member of the Mississippi Freedom Democratic Party, drawing national attention to their cause at the year's Democratic Convention. Mrs. Hamer continued her activism through her declining health until her death in 1977. So Mrs. Hamer, she is a hero of Mississippi, a hero of the civil rights, a hero of the Black tradition of arms. Many of you may have heard of her before, but some of you haven't. This is some new information. I hope that this will kind of push you to investigate more about her. So now we have Mr. C.O. Chin. So it said, this is my town, and these are my people, here to protect, excuse me, I'm here to protect my people, and even if you don't like this, I'm not going anywhere. That's Mr. Chin. So he made this statement to the Mississippi State Director of the Congress of Racial Equality, or CORE, after that director told Chin about the organization's nonviolent philosophy. So Mr. Chin did not believe in turning the other cheek. He definitely believed in making sure that you are able to defend yourself and your community. Chin was representative of tough older men who were determined to keep the movement organizers alive. He's a successful local businessman and entrepreneur in Canton, Mississippi, where he owned a 152-acre farm, operated a bootlegging operation, rhythm and blues nightclub, and had a large collection of pistols, shotguns, and rifles. Everyone in the county, including the sheriff, knew not to push against Chin too hard. The sheriff is quoted as having said that there are only two bad SOBs in this county, me and that N-word C.O. Chin. So even the racist sheriff of the town, of the county, knew that, if you mess with Mr. Chin, you were going to be in for some problems. And if you mess with any of Mr. Chin's people, you're going to be in for some problems. Mr. Chin established his reputation for himself early in life, where one day a white farmer approached his mother and demanded that Chin work for a white person to leave the county. This is when he was 13 years old, after which he took the .38 pistol from their home, went to that white farmer, pointed at him, and told the farmer to stay out of the Chin family business. So he did not take any stuff off of anyone. He was very committed to the movement, which included so committed that he sacrificed most of his businesses. He lost his farm, he lost his bootlegging operation, he lost most of his property, but he was so committed to making sure that the organizer stayed alive that didn't matter to him. So let's move on. We've got Robert F. Williams. He is one of my personal favorites. I call him the godfather of the black armed self-defense tradition. So he says, I've asserted the right of Negroes to meet the violence of the Ku Klux Klan by armed self-defense and have acted on it. It has always been an accepted right of Americans, as the history of our Western states proves, that where the law is unable or unwilling to enforce order, the citizens can and must act in self-defense against lawless violence. All right, Mr. Williams. So as I said, he is known as the, excuse me, I lost my place. So it said he was known as the godfather of the black armed self-defense tradition. He made this statement in the Crusader, his weekly newsletter that he wrote while in exile in Cuba to escape death at the hands of a racist white mob. Williams is known as the godfather of black armed self-defense and is a significant figure within the black tradition of arms. Williams, a World War II veteran, began his civil rights work in Monroe, North Carolina, where he became president of a local NAACP chapter. Eventually, Williams and his wife, Mabel, formed a rifle club, the Black Guard, by concealing their racial identity to get a charter from a well-known gun organization. And we all know what that gun organization is. After an incident, let me go back. All right, excuse me. After an incident where a white rapist of an African-American woman was acquitted by an all-white jury, Williams began advocating for African-Americans to defend themselves from such attacks with lethal force, as the government was unable or unwilling to provide justice for the African-American community. These statements led Williams to being kicked out of the NAACP. Despite this, Williams and the Black Guard protected the African-American community in Monroe, North Carolina, and even came to the aid of NAACP Freedom Riders when they were accosted by the Ku Klux Klan and their supporters. All right. So next slide, Mr. Hartman Turnbow. I wasn't being non-violent. I was protecting my wife and my family. So that was one of Mr. Turnbow's many Turnbow-isms, as they were known. Turnbow said this in response to questions of how he could use firearms for self-defense and support nonviolent protests for political change. Turnbow was a civil rights activist and practitioner of the black armed self-defense within the Mississippi Freedom Movement. He was involved with several civil rights organizations of the time, including the Mississippi Freedom Democratic Party, or MFDP, Council of Federated Organizations, or COFO, Student Nonviolent Coordinating Committee, or SNCC, and the National Association for the Advancement of Colored People, or the NAACP. He was part of the First 14, a group of 14 African Americans who in April of 1963, April of 1963, attempted voter registration, or were the first to attempt voter registration since the end of Reconstruction, which was in the end of the 1890s. So he was the first to step forward and register when the group was confronted by a white sheriff in front of the courthouse. A month later, after the incident, the Ku Klux Klan terrorist organization attempted to murder Turnbow and his family in retaliation for attempting to register to vote. 2 Klan terrorists firebombed and shot into his house in the middle of the night. Turnbow's wife and daughter were quickly able to escape into the woods out back, but the terrorists waited outside for Turnbow to exit so they could finish the job. As the house burned, Turnbow strode out the front door, shouldered a high-capacity semi-automatic rifle he owned, and began firing at the terrorists. His gunfire was effective, killing one and chasing off the other. This incident made Turnbow a folk hero to many Southern African Americans and young people throughout SNCC due to the bravery he showed in the face of danger. And so that quote that's up there, he actually made that quote to reporters who were asking him how he could use firearms to shoot and defend himself when he was such a proponent of nonviolent political activism and advocacy. So as you can see, all of these figures made it very clear that there was no conflict between personal self-defense nor any conflict between advocating and protesting in a peaceful manner to make sure that your rights were respected by the community and by the government in which you were citizens of.
Awesome, man. Douglas, thank you so much for that. And what I would tell our chapter viewership out there on Facebook is that we're going to have that. What you just saw was just a small preview. Douglas has a much larger, much more comprehensive presentation on historical figures in our community as it relates to the Second Amendment, and we're going to have him back to actually do a much broader presentation. I would share with you folks you spoke of Robert F. Williams. This is his book.
Yes, sir.
It's a great read. He is a local North Carolina person, so this is an awesome, awesome book. I also have this one here.
Yes.
You see it? Oh, there we are. Again, great book, full of great information. So please, I got those off of Amazon. They're on the NAAGA National webpage. If you want to get any other books and materials to help educate yourself on what our community has done for the Second Amendment, those are just the first two that I ordered, and I've got some more coming. But I did want to again thank Philip for being here. I want to again thank Douglas for taking the time on this Saturday. I know you guys are down there in Georgia. You're doing great things. We look very much forward to new things to come, the convention being probably the biggest thing. And again, thank you to everyone on Facebook that have tuned in today. We appreciate everything you all do to come out and support us. Again, another shout out to Eagle One Gun Range, who has always been supporting in this chapter. I also would like to take the opportunity to wish Felicia Johnson, one of the owners of Eagle One, a happy birthday today. It's her birthday, so I want to take the opportunity to say
happy birthday, Felicia.
And Philip, last words for you, sir, and then we'll be out of here.
Yeah, I'm just really proud of you guys up there in North Carolina, proud of the organization, obviously, and you guys are doing great work, and just keep it up, man.
Thank you so much. Appreciate everybody. We'll see you guys next time. Thank you, Joy, for doing this.
Thanks, Joy. Thanks for having us today.